Welcome to another installment of The Goddess Keys, where we activate the tools and the jewels to support us with embodying the true essence of who we are before the programs, before the soul contracts, vows, oaths, and agreements that a lot of us are now dismantling from our energetic fields. One way to support with this process of unraveling and unbinding and also dissolving a lot of the false structures that much of your reality has been built upon is this concept called Spiral Astromancy that I'm introducing. This is not astrology first and foremost, and I am not an astrologer. However, Spiral Astromancy does work to decode your astrology chart. The reason why I have an immense interest and have studied astrology, and yet I'm not an astrologer, is because from my research, decades of research at this point, I have learned that astrology is basically the blueprint to your entrapment within this simulation. And so if you adhere to your astrology chart, it's you consenting to adhering to the script, the program that was assigned to you by the controllers of the false matrix simulation. But for a lot of us who are waking up and really understanding the immense power and depth that we have, and a lot of times that means unlearning many things that we have assumed as being just who we are, and unraveling that and not being afraid of collapsing. In the simulation, we're always told to strive higher and higher, to climb up corporate ladders and whatnot. But when we engage in this concept of the spiral, there's an inward journey that we take, and we fold deeper and deeper inward and into ourselves. And so it collapses that ladder in order to do that. Sometimes when I've worked with folks, that's a big piece of what we're doing, is we are collapsing the false structures of the programs and the identities that we've adopted within the simulation. So I've utilized astrology in many of my sessions with folks and the work that I've done with folks to get a sense or a snapshot of some of the things that you might be up against when you do choose to detach yourself from the false matrix simulation. It's going to show you where your weak points are, quote unquote. It's going to show where you're going to be the most energy harvested. And it's also going to show what natural and latent gifts within you have been the most suppressed. It's all kind of like a script or a story with the astrology chart. So Spiral Astromancy is all about taking that inward journey, that inward coiling journey into your innermost self, collapsing the hierarchies, collapsing the identity scripts, the illusions that much of your current NPC profile has been built upon, and then also mapping that out through the astrology chart. But we take it a step further and we look at the architecture that your astrology chart maps out for you. We look at the grid, we look at frequency fences, and we see how your astrology chart is going to show you the grids and the frequency fences that are the most active within the architecture of your reality. Because you get to a certain point where you've done enough of the cord cutting, you've done enough of the soul contract revocation, even etheric implants and the removal of them is not big picture enough. You have to get at the architecture of the reality that you're currently looking to step away from. And you need to kind of know what the blueprint of that has been so you can dismantle it. And, you can choose what you do from there. Maybe you rebuild something that feels more organic to your innermost self. Maybe you don't rebuild. Maybe it's a state of becoming and living completely in the now. The idea here is that you're living from your essence instead of from a script or from a storyline that was assigned to you. Okay, and so what you do with that is really up to you. There's no one right way to do it. The idea, though, is just seeing what sort of systems have you been enmeshed in. It's like we know that oppression exists. We know that restriction and constriction exists. What about the architecture of what that looks like? Instead of looking at this from more of a theoretical kind of standpoint or even a spiritual kind of standpoint, starting to look at the blueprints and the layouts of the layers of entrapment within the simulation is critical to supporting you with letting go of false structures. If you know how to read your astrology chart then and interpret it, not to follow it, not for that to be your sealed fate and destiny, but to transcend it, to collapse it, to retrieve your power when you need to. That's what studying astrology is for. And it's not to be an astrologer, and it's not to read your horoscope every day and abide by that. It's to dismantle the structure of where your programs are, and you can see that within your astrology chart. Spiral Astromancy specifically looks at the way the house systems interact. It very much pays attention to the house systems as well as the planets. We kicked it off last week with the 10th house and really going into the 10th house grids and the frequency fences attached to that. And definitely check that out. I'm going to link that below, as well as the playlist that I have to support folks with retrieving their energy from the astrology matrix and kind of collapsing any tired, played out karmic loops that are playing out in your birth chart, and being able to clearly identify these karmic loops through grids and through frequency fences that are operating through those grids. Because the more we can name this, and the more we can identify the who, the what, the when, the where, the how, the more power we have in the situation to shape our reality and to shape our destiny. We are very powerful creator beings. A lot of times, though, we don't. It's like sometimes feels like you're navigating the simulation with like a weird blindfold, right? And you're not able to fully see where you're going. You know that you're ready for something different, but then you're also certain ways can feel incapacitated with the level of entrapment within the simulation. And that can come from societal or peer pressure or family pressure or financial constraints or political issues. I mean, the list goes on, right? The idea is to look more at the structure and the architecture of what these grid systems are and to understand them. I am excited to be offering Spiral Astromancy readings. So if you're interested in this type of information and you want to take a deep dive on your birth chart in a way that's freedom-based, that gets you not just out of the box, but out of any kind of linear, angular sort of ways of looking at your nature of reality. Spiral Astromancy is for folks who know that they're code crashers in this simulation. They know that they are here to, not as a mission either, because we're getting out of that whole light worker energy of I'm assigned on a mission to raise the consciousness of the planet, because there's a lot of distortion in that as well. You know, sometimes you embodying your true self is enough. That's it. That's all you need to do. You don't have to march. You don't have to run for office. Sometimes you being unapologetically you in a way that might even disrupt certain algorithms, that is enough, because you lead by example, you lead by embodiment, and people see you showing up as an organic version of yourself, okay, an embodied version of yourself, and that is enough. You shift the nature of reality just with that, you know, whereas the false matrix would have you believe that you need all these certain degrees, you need all of these certain connections and these networking opportunities in order to show that you've made it. You need X amount of likes, you need X amount of followers. And we're seeing more and more of the cracks of that foundation, okay? So Spiral Astromancy is also for people who are knowing that there's more to reality than what is the popular opinion, and they're ready to dismantle the false structures of their own identity. I mean, it starts with us, right? So a lot of times we are encouraged to change our communities, to change our environment from the outside in, but this is more of an inside out approach. And so with that, I'm excited to announce today's topic. I know that I kind of went in on a little bit more of a spiel today, but today we're talking about the seventh house. And we are talking about the frequency fences as well as the grids that are most going to impact folks who are seventh house dominant. Okay. And one thing that, as I mentioned earlier, Spiral Astromancy does like to look at more of the house systems and also asteroids too. This astrological style is a little bit different because I know a lot of times people like to focus on the sun signs, as they call them. I think that there's some distortion even in that. If you go into sidereal, right, they're kind of more about the lunar aspect as well. For me, I think both are very important, but the way that I've organized the Spiral Astromancy readings is to focus more on the houses as well as asteroids and planetary alchemy as well. So those have been, and then also in the grids, I would also add even a touch of astrocartography. So if you're somebody who is really interested in astrocartography and like what that's basically you being interested in what are the grids doing when I am in this part of the world versus that part of the world. Okay, that is kind of like stepping your toe into this concept of spiral astromancy. So let's get into the seventh house and specifically what goes on in this particular house system as it relates to grids and frequency fences. So this is going to be the false twin flame house. I'll just say that. I've seen it time and time again. People who have a dominant seventh house or specific love aspects within the seventh house, some kind of a significant marker within the seventh house. So some examples would, number one, be a seventh house stellium. A stellium is having 3 or more planets in a particular house. And so that means that you have many different multi-layered contracts, vows, oaths, and agreements related to this false twin flame architecture. And I'm actually going to link a Medium article that I recently wrote about this and about particularly around 7 of the 7 layers of the phantom architecture of the marriage pyramid. Okay, and one of these was the false twin flame architecture. And let me just kind of break that down for a little bit, because you might be somebody who has been involved with somebody that has felt like a twin flame, but maybe that person brought you a lot of pain, brought you a lot of heartbreak, but then also maybe that person also initiated a certain like spiritual quest in you or spiritual growth and development within you, right? And so that I've learned is a part of the program. Like that it's just like an energy harvesting kind of an energy drain. If you can be caught up in these fictional stories where it's like you're kind of irrationally pulled by emotions with somebody who doesn't make you feel good or who doesn't bring good results into your life, and when I say good results, I mean you feel good about them. You have pleasure, you have joy with these results. If pleasure and joy is not the end result, then something's off. And some spiritualists would say, oh no, you need to learn through struggle, you need to learn through pain sometimes. That's also a program as well, to keep you in these pain cycles or these resurrection loops, which is what a lot of the architecture of the simulation love. They love for us to bring ourselves to the brink of death in different ways. Like a really big story I can think of that really represents somebody who might have this false twin flame architecture playing out in their fields is if you've been like really into the whole Isis, Osiris, set story, okay? If that has played out within your field, or if you felt really connected to that is the key indicator of like a false twin flame architecture, right? Because you're constantly on this quest, and a lot of times it feels like it's a never-ending quest to save this partner, right? Because what happened to Osiris, he got caught up into 14 pieces by Set, okay? And then Isis was on a mission to basically find and locate Osiris, gather up all of his parts, and then conceive, right? And so there's a whole kind of story around that, but it's basically centered around this concept of resurrection and chasing and being in pain, and pain being a pathway to healing, okay? And Earth being a school, hearing that a lot too. That's another really big program, that we're here to learn a lesson, okay? Like a lot of these things, we need to really start second guessing anything that we've been taught as being true. Let's think about all the stuff that's been coming out in the media as it relates to just random weird conspiracies, okay? It's just like a constant thing. It's not something that we can ignore or hide from even. So if that's the case, then what are the other things that have been told to us that are not true, that we've just assumed as being true because we believed it? Isis, Osiris, Set, Heru, that whole story is a pretty popular story. Whether you are into the Kemetic tradition, obviously that would be really big, but also other traditions as well, in the New Age spiritual community as well. That's a whole thing. But that's a part of the twin flame loop. You're always trying to like redeem an aspect of your partner that seems almost irredeemable, putting somebody back together again, piece by piece. It's a big codependent loop. So if that's something that you have been attracted to, or if you felt as though you did represent that archetype Isis at one point, and maybe you were dating somebody or were recovering from dating somebody or being with somebody where they had more of that Osiris archetype, they were taken from you in some kind of way. There was an adversary, that whole thing. And that plays out a lot with what people call karmic family members and all that kind of thing. But all of that is a part of a program, and it's pretty deep, because with the false twin flame architecture, a lot of times there's programs embedded to us specifically for folks who are femme identified or who have wombs. This applies specifically to you. You will have issues sometimes as it relates to feeling like you need to give up everything for your partner, feeling as though you tie or tether your identity to being chosen. So folks who have 7th house dominant charts, in the false matrix simulation, you were coded as being the codependent one, the one who couldn't be alone, the one who maybe sometimes settled for less or got harmed in relationships, but didn't leave because, or didn't think they could leave because they needed to be with a partner, needed to feel chosen in order to feel enough. In the 7th house, there's usually an energy of you living through other people. And this can a lot of times manifest in your family dynamics as well as the partners that you might end up with. And for some folks, especially if you have a lot of contracts in the 7th house. So that's something else to know about the 7th house. It's the house of soul contract. It's the legal house. It's, Libra is known as being that sign, which also like represents justice, right? Or Ma'at, that kind of thing. So it's kind of within that vein as well. It also, though, holds a lot of distortion. The number 7 holds a lot of energy as it relates to the false matrix maintaining its balance, like maintaining its authority, right? But what if you are seeking your own, right? What if you are seeking to like create your own reality? Then there's a point of tension there, okay? But the seventh house, if you have a lot of planets there, you might find that your seventh house holds a lot of soul contracts, and a lot of times they're tied to things like marriage. A lot of times business partnerships are related to the seventh house as well, or even the entanglement of the two, because in a lot of ways, like the institution of marriage is a business contract in a lot of ways. There's that whole thing as well. So that also could lead to courts, right? Could lead to divorce, that kind of thing. Different things that could cause, partnerships to end up in court, whatever that looks like. Let's get into some of the grids specifically as it relates to the seventh house. And I want to explain more around what I mean when I say seventh house grids basically being attached to the false twin flame grid. So one thing I also want to say is, in my Spiral Astromancy readings, I am providing a 90-page PDF for folks, just explaining the process of Spiral Astromancy. And I'm only giving this out right now to folks who get one of these readings from me. So, the idea is I do a reading on your chart, and then it launches you to go into a deeper inner gnosis, or not even gnosis, but a deeper inner unraveling or unfolding, however you want to refer to it, as knowledge of self, like that kind of energy. That's what it's supposed to do. So it's not really supposed to keep you feeling like I'm the expert, and then you're just kind of getting your report done by some astrologer type person or healer type person or fixer. This is more around like, here are some of the patterns that I've been able to identify and then weave together, and then here's a strategy around how I've done that, and then it launches you into your own deeper quest of your chart, okay? This Spiral Astromancy reading is not designed to give you all the answers. It's going to support you a lot, and you're going to be exposed to a lot of new information, maybe things you've never thought of before, maybe things that are a little mind-blowing. Like, that might happen, but at the same time, it's just a small catalyst for what you will be able to do for yourself. So this 90-minute PDF, 90-page PDF is to support folks who are ready to, you're already really well versed in your chart. That's one thing I can say. Like, folks that I chat with, either they start off, when we start working together, maybe they start off really not knowing about their astrology at all, and then they get really good at decoding it by the time that I'm finished working with them. You kind of end up knowing your own thing in a lot more of a deeper way. And so this Spiral Astromancy pre-recorded session that I'm offering with folks is to just really help you to learn about your chart in a way that maybe you've never been trained to think about it, and then to deepen your curiosity. And you should get a lot of answers in the reading, but there will also be a lot of questions that you have afterwards. And then that's where your beautiful artwork unfolds. So I'm just kind of like the catalyst, sometimes the fire starter, that sort of thing. But like, you are the ultimate alchemist, and you end up basically shaping where that energy goes, right? And magnifying it in your own reality and clearing different false structures. Like, all of that is you. So that's also why I'm stepping out of this whole realm of coaching, because I feel like coaching diminishes. When you just do coaching and client, it diminishes the full spectrum of each person and what they provide coming to the table. It kind of boxes actually both parties, and it boxes in the coach in different ways. It boxes in the client in different ways. And a lot of times it's just inherently built upon codependent structures. My sessions are for folks who are not here for trends. They're not here for things that are popular. You dig deeper, you research the crevices of the internet to find different pieces of information, or you're curious. You're naturally curious. You're a natural seeker. Those are the folks that I tend to work with the best with, and also who I just naturally attract anyway. If that sounds like you, then check out more about Spiral Astromancy down below. But now let's get into those grids and those frequency fences. Seventh house grid is the contractual reflection grid, a binding overlay that externalizes identity, value, and intimacy through mirrored partnerships, twin scripts, and relationship-based validation loops. It encodes worth through being chosen, seen, or needed by another. We talked a little bit already about the seventh house and how it's a lot that has to do with like soul contracts in general, marriages, that's a contract as well. Contracts that transcend this physical realm. What's your connection with those things? Also, love contracts. The architecture of this false twin is built upon mirrors and soul contracts. And a lot of times it's a distorted mirror that you're looking into with this twin flame. The more research I've been doing on this, it's like a lot of us have more than one twin flame. It's not that you're just like this big light worker that like made all these soul contracts to have all these twin flames to heal humanity. And, there are schools of thought that would lead you to believe that. But this is more about like, no, it's just a form of entrapment. Because the false twin flame, and I say false twin flame because I don't believe in twin flames, actually. That's a completely codependent architecture. It makes it so that one person in the union has to suffer to hold up the relationship. Like one person in the union a lot of times has to be the sacrifice. And unfortunately, in the simulation, that tends to be people with wombs, people who have wombs and who give birth to children as well. Okay. These are the beings that are going to be under the most control under the simulation. And it's because of the immense power of the womb. And there is something about having a physical womb where there's a technology that's you kind of already have access to around interdimensional travel. If you are really dominant in the seventh house, like if you have a stellium, for example, this could really indicate some false twin flame architecture that's happening multidimensionally, quite honestly, because this could go, galactic and beyond, really. So it's just something to keep in mind. So let's talk about the different distortions of the seventh house grid. So some of the distortions would include twin flame siphons and divine union contracts, partnership as projection field, as in you complete me, define me, prove me. Okay, mirror-based identity roles. So muse, savior, goddess, wife, healer. Like, y'all, it goes deep. Like, even the name of my channel is something I'm thinking about, because it's like I'm even transcending that energy and frequency of goddess, to be quite honest. It's actually limiting. I'm finding that more limiting these days. Okay, so other aspects would include energetic enmeshment or fusion mass. So empathy as overabsorption. And then need to be chosen to feel real or worthy. Looping breakups as karmic rebindings. Sacrifice of sovereignty for belonging. Some signs that the seventh house grid may be active is like if you feel unanchored without partnership or external validation. If you have repeating dynamics of rescue, projection, or sacrifice in your relationships, or if creation or business cycles tied to romantic connection, longing for the one to activate you. So some of these fields or these frequency fences within the seventh house grids would be the mirror contract field. So it binds your worth to being seen or reflected by another. So it's like, okay, I'm not worthy unless I have that significant other. Something must be wrong with me if I don't have that significant other. these sorts of things come up. And then you end up building your identity from this relationship and not your self source, okay? And this can lead into a false twin flame program. And what this does is it hooks your heart field into mirrored partnerships that drain spiral vitality. And this is where we get into destiny swapping or different karmic entrapments and glamour magic and all that kind of stuff. A lot of that can be done through the false twin program, because if we think about twin, it's a double, right? Like it's that double kind of energy that you're working with. And the ideal with you connecting with your innermost self is you, no one else. You thinking that you're split into different realms and dimensions. That's something else I've been learning, is the programs attached to parallel lives. That is a program within itself, because you're seeing yourself as being fragmented. You're in one dimension here, you're in another dimension there. You know, a lot of folks have had snippets of parallel lives. They've seen that. That's a big thing. If you are like navigating past lives, navigating parallel lives or future lives, work on collapsing all of them into this now moment and integrating all soul fragments. You know, there shouldn't be these different aspects of yourself in all these different realms and dimensions. Like why can't you hold your field and your density in the now, right where you're at? And you are caught up in twin flame sort of dynamics where you need somebody else to complete you. It's really difficult to hold that resonance. Okay, and so another thing that happens is the ascension marriage grid. So it imposes spiritual unions based on hierarchical roles, and it tethers your soul path to somebody else's trajectory. So you might be feeling like you're living for your partner and you have to give everything to your partner. And there literally might be like soul contracts intact if you're in these like false twin programs. And usually it's the person with the womb who ends up needing to do the most sacrificing in those dynamics. Okay, so it's kind of rigged for people who are womb code carriers. Okay. Also, you get caught up in a validation loop feedback. You're seeking validation outside of yourself. You require others to validate your value, beauty, work, or presence. So another thing that happens is this thing called the mimic love field, which substitutes your, true intimacy with more performative affection or fantasy bonding. You can see this a lot on different social media sites where folks portray their relationships on them. They're doing that within a mimic love field, and it's wrapped in a lot of different like glamour magic, as well as ancestral programs, and then like religious or societal ideas or ideals. And then there is the union as mission trap, which makes partnership a condition for planetary service, legacy, purpose, even wealth. There's a lot of folks who are holding agreements or scripts in your field. You know, if you were to look into your subconscious hard drive, which I just kind of equate to going into like the basement or the attic sometimes of your house, right? You know, that's where a lot of the stuff that you keep hidden away, you try not to think about it too much. That's why it's in the basement or the attic. But it's still there, and there might be some important stuff in there. So one thing that I've been kind of learning a little bit more about is there are vows, oaths, and agreements that certain folks have made that they aren't able to experience wealth, or they aren't able to experience abundance until they are united with their twin flame. And that is a huge program that, if that's something that you think, definitely consider that that's a program that's running within your field, because you're always seeking outside of yourself and you're always looking into the future. So there's two things happening. There's that love spell, and then there's a time spell. So you got the Venus, and then you got Saturn at play. So then it's just the codependency spell. You're merging fields, you're lacking the energetic boundaries, okay, and the physical boundaries probably in certain ways. it merges fields in ways that disable your individuation. So you might even get like energetically punished or punished in the simulation for leaving that kind of relationship because you're supposed to stay. That's what's been scripted for you. And then there's a wounded feminine mirror grid. So this is something where the feminine is disgraced at a certain point, but then resurrects herself and empowers herself to be a strong woman. But a lot of times the identity is built on the wounding. And so you keep on having to loop the wounding in order to hold that identity together. It causes a self-fulfilling prophecy of you are, reflecting the feminine only through distortion, broken, too much, or too unworthy. Also, there's an ownership overlay, unfortunately. So a lot of times your partner has ownership signatures on you, and they're installed a lot of times through surname, marriage, or different soul binding rituals. And then you have the legalized love loop, and that's where the marriage licenses come in as well, okay? And you place your love within this state or religious jurisdiction. So is it all doom and gloom for somebody who's 7th house dominant? Absolutely not. You are here to overcome codependency and to truly see your inner value, and not just to kind of say it as rhetoric, but to truly feel it and to truly see the distortions and the gaslighting techniques of the simulation, break through them, dissolve them, and enable your own self to emerge. So somebody who is really 7th house dominant, or who has had issues as it relates to these twin flame dynamics or karmic dynamics, or feeling like they are contracted to a lot of things, you are here to break that spell. You are here to actually transcend the mirrors. The mirrors have been used against you a lot. People who have a lot of 7th house placements, you might have been really distorted through glamour magic or through different masks and loops as it relates to putting on a show for others so that others can feel comfortable and accommodated. So a lot of that is you breaking down a lot of what those artificial masks were and emerging through your innermost self, and you may not know what that fully is. And so that actually can be scary, but it also can be really exciting. You can end up picking up new hobbies or doing things that you never thought that you would do. Maybe even having a style that you never thought that you would wear. Maybe there was a style that you've always kind of wanted to play around with and toy with, but you never thought that it was quote unquote you, or that style would be accepted. Your fun path as you deprogram and as you detach from all of these looping codependency systems is to allow your true self to emerge and to learn to truly learn about love through the love of self. And that's going to feel really weird and wrong a lot of times, because if you're 7th house dominant, then you were taught that love means codependency. Love means sacrifice. And so you're learning a new way to love. And this is past what any false light program says that love is, or what any religious program says that love is, or what any legal institution says what love is. You get to discover a sacred love that, to be quite honest, is pretty difficult to find in this simulation at this time because of the massive twin flame programming. I mean, marriage institutions have been built upon is this idea of finding your other half, right? And building a life with your other half. A lot of your economic expectations has been built upon this idea of another half, having this codependent relationship that you need in order to thrive in this society. Somebody who's 7th house dominant, who's waking up out of the simulation, you're here to collapse that. and not to do it from the external, not to fight the power, but to do it from within. And that's kind of where we're going to stop today. If you're interested in learning more about this concept of spiral astromancy, check out my Beyond the Birth Chart reading, which you can find on my Ko-Fi platform currently. I've been doing these readings for a small group of folks so far. So thanks for the folks on Patreon who've supported this reading, as well as my clients that I also work with. And I'm expanding, and I'm excited to share this with more folks who are ready to drop the mask, drop the projections, and walk through those mirrors into a more embodied form of self-love. So, sending you lots of love, joy, and peace until we meet again.